A lot has been said about Leonardo da Vinci and his works. And his popularity, I think, is disproportionately huge. He is just too popular. I mean, out of the 9 million people who visit the Louvre every year, 7 million stand in line to wait to see the Mona Lisa. His painting, Salvator Mundi, in 2017, I think, or 2015, sold for $450 million. The previous one was a Picasso painting that sold for like a third of that. These figures just show how great his influence and his popularity are. But I've always felt that there is something missing about this Leonardo story. There is something missing about all that, behind all the popularity. I mean, admit it. Do you really think that the Mona Lisa is that beautiful? I mean, some of these art critics will come and tell you, oh, but look at what's behind her, look at the fog, and look at all these layers and the mysterious smile. Personally, I don't see it as that mysterious. I mean, it's good, but is it that good? The same applies for the other works. So there is something enigmatic, something mysterious about Leonardo da Vinci in general. He didn't write as you'd expect him to write. He even in his notebooks made a lot of arithmetic mistakes. He was a great procrastinator. So this is a strangely creative, expansive, and unique individual. He is the exemplary Renaissance man. And he has such a unique personality, such unique experiences. He worked on weird inventions, weird for his time, and had some artistic and practical courage, which are very interesting to examine. And I think this is our starting point here in the Prometheus shot when we talk about Leonardo da Vinci. We will try to think about the things less covered, the practically insightful. No fancy artistic explanations or too much historical detail, but a journey that tries to draw a big picture out of the many projects and events in his life. Was Leonardo da Vinci the best artist to ever live? I mean, I asked that about Picasso a while back, and one of the funny comments was that Picasso's work was just an introduction to finger painting. This is very subjective, but I'm not here to discuss if Leonardo is the greatest artist to ever live. I'm more interested in the less known, in the patterns behind his work, in the insights that we can get and what it means to us, what we can learn from it, things that carry deep meaning and that can help us reflect on our own work. So this series, the Prometheus shot, has 3 implicit threads, more or less. One is focused on art and beauty. Another is focused on science and thinking. And the third is focused on innovation and management. And I've chosen the Leonardo episode to fit within the second one, Leonardo as a thinker. But it could have easily fit into any of the 3 because Leonardo was a scientist, an artist, and an engineer. And in this sense, he reflects all the spirals in the AIC framework. We will explore the greatness of his work. And as we do that, we will stop at some of the works, some of his most meaningful achievements too, but in the full and in the deeper sense of the word. And we will do that in the spirit of the Atlas of Worldly Wisdom. So we will focus on the integration of awareness, creativeness, and intent, right? How knowledge becomes awareness, how actions become creativeness, and how plans become intent. And we will focus on an understanding of how greatness happens. So in exploring Leonardo da Vinci's genius, we will start with thinking about understanding, thinking about his approach to knowledge. And then we will move a little bit to his artistic vision and what we can learn from that. And then to his attitude towards innovation management, in a sense, which is his engineering work. And throughout all these sections, we will think about the elements of creativity and of genius and of great achievements that all of this reflects. So first, Leonardo was a polymath. What is a polymath? A polymath is a person with knowledge and excellence across different fields of knowledge, of science, of art, usually mixing different disciplines and being good at all of them. And this is a discussion we will look at a couple of times today, because this is something I always think about. Is the age of the polymath over? I mean, in Leonardo's time, it was arguably relatively easier for you to be a polymath, to be a master of different fields. But our age, the complexity of our knowledge, the social changes to our work systems, as if they force us to specialize more. I mean, look at the list of topics or subjects that Leonardo worked in: flying devices, military engineering, painting, art, sculpture, anatomy, medicine, architecture, urban planning, crazy, the geology. And he had original achievements in many of these fields. His approach to knowledge was characterized by a lot of integration, by a lot of practical application, by the primacy of experience and testing. And we will see that he developed sort of a proto scientific method. It is interesting here to note that Leonardo lacked formal education. He was a practically oriented man, and we will see how this affects his life's destiny. An interesting tidbit here is that in some places in his notebooks, he seems to make basic arithmetics or mathematical errors. Now, he was a geometry genius, but to me, I can't help but think if this is related to his embracing of uncertainty. And you can relate that to approximate thinking in a way, I think. So, Leonardo's knowledge system. Leonardo had a big number of notebooks. He was always taking notes. His notebooks are a collection of writings, sketches, practice, personal to-do lists even, about different topics. You can see things about art, anatomy, engineering, flight, geology, philosophy, etc. And by the way, they are written in mirror script. So they are written in a reversed way, maybe because he liked privacy, maybe, I don't know, because it suit his left-handed writing. This is something to think about. But the notebooks, they give us a unique perspective into his thinking, into his process. And we can see his interest in the interconnectedness of the different fields, his relentless curiosity and exploration, and how he was always seeking patterns. He was always seeking knowledge across different fields. This curiosity seemed to be in the notebooks, like a demon, taking him left, right. Go ask this person about how they move on ice in the Flanders. Ask this master on how this thing is achieved, and so on. He had these kinds of to-do lists. And these are elements that, to me directly, it reminded me of a number of practices that are recommended in creativity, right? To seek patterns in different things. Even he talks about a certain exercise. This is something sometimes we do in creativity trainings, where he used to look at stains on the wall or patterns of clouds and try to get inspiration from that on the different things he was working on, right? So he was doing this kind of associative thinking, again, very early. These things, they were being intuitively discovered by him. The notebooks reflect a life learning attitude and a very interesting and unique approach to knowledge management. And there is a lot that we can learn from that. We can learn a lot from Leonardo's work, thinking, notebooks. And a book I can recommend here is How to Think Like Leonardo da Vinci. This is a book by Gelb. Now, 7 Steps to Genius Every Day. Reading a book won't make you a genius, but this is a really good book. It is included in the learning plan of the Atlas of Worldly Wisdom, because these principles are very interesting to reflect on. Some of these principles include primacy of demonstration, being able to prove what you think about. And we are talking about a man living in a time where Aristotle was the authority more than experience for many thinkers and scientists of his age, right? The principle of sfumato. So it starts with a technique for blending light and shadow, the dark and the bright, but intellectually it reflects the trait of embracing ambiguity and embracing uncertainty. Interconnectedness of things, the interconnectedness of art and science, seeking patterns and on. These are different traits that are reflected in different works by Leonardo. Leonardo was driven by his interdisciplinary curiosity, as I told you, by this demon to keep jumping between fields. Sometimes it had bad outcomes in the shape of uncompleted works, but this interdisciplinary curiosity led him to make important contributions across a number of different fields. He made interesting contributions in geology, in the study of friction, in the study of water flows. Leonardo was sort of a proto-scientist. And to me, this is his most important quality. He focused on principles that later became more formalized in the scientific method, putting a lot of focus on the importance of observation, experimentation, being able to demonstrate before you reach conclusion. And so all of these elements, his interdisciplinary thinking, his knowledge management systems, the map of thinking that he created for us, and the different fields that he explored and he used. So this reflection was reused in art, was reused in his engineering work and general writings. Leonardo the artist and his artistic vision. I think Leonardo's artistic vision is strongly characterized by this theme of harmony and integration, and this is partially the reason I wanted to do this episode and to position it as it is. This harmony of art and science, this harmony of the microcosm and the macrocosm, this prevalence of proportions, of similarity, of elegance that is reflected in the actual works but also in Leonardo's life in general is very interesting. If you look at the Vitruvian Man, for example, which is an old symbol, an old discussion of a concept ancient by Vitruvius, Leonardo's implementation of this concept of the perfectly proportioned man fitting in a circle and in a square reflects some of these themes of harmony. Some have commented that if the circle is considered to represent divinity and the square is considered to represent humanity, then this image reflects this idea of the microcosm and the macrocosm being in full harmony. This isn't disconnected because Leonardo explicitly says this over and over again in his notebooks. His studies on water flow, for example, on the flow of water, on hydraulics, is reflected in some of his work in drawing hair. He draws comparisons between rivers and arteries and veins in a human body. He draws comparison between these and between branches of the plants. And he actually goes and tries to measure, right, geometrically the angle of different branches, how they grow and how that compares to the human body. The same goes for the city and the human body. So Leonardo was trying to bring all this together. And this is also reflected in something very interesting. He used to call it learning how to see. And he believed that the artist needed to look at something because our sense of vision is our most important sense. So he used to say that the artist needs to look at something and see it in a way beyond what most people can see. And there is a very interesting story here in which one time he was looking at a lake and he saw the pebble fall in a lake while he heard the bell of a church chiming. And so he automatically perceived that the ripples in the water are kind of similar to how this sound is traveling through the air. Right, so thinking about airwaves, and this kind of reflects this ability to see beyond what the artist is seeing and to connect all these different fields of experience. Leonardo used to believe that the artist is a disciple of experience first. This is discussed in detail in Learning How to Think Like Leonardo da Vinci. He placed a lot of value on sensations, on the body, on the senses in this endeavor to harmonize, to understand the world, and to be able to express the world. His creative vision is also reflected in a number of ways. In The Last Supper, for example, well, I read somewhere this painting being called a cinematic masterpiece, and it kind of is, considering his age. It's very interesting the way it is positioned, the way it blends into the space, the perspective, how it centers on Jesus Christ. It is a masterpiece of proportions, and it is also telling of another trait of Leonardo's, which is experimentation, relentless experimentation. So he did this in a way that was novel, innovative, and it decayed very quickly. And the painting you see now is a remake of The Last Supper. Another painting to mention here is Virgin on the Rocks, and well, this has a number of elements related to creative vision, because I read somewhere, and I'm not sure, I'm not an expert in plants, but some of the plants in this image are a blend of two different species, and so this is a kind of sci-fi happening there. But interestingly, this image reflects Leonardo da Vinci's studies on geology in rock formations, and how the plants are living among these different kinds of rocks. But also, this painting created a lot of drama and a lot of controversy because there are two copies of it, and it seems that, according to one story that Leonardo was asked to redo it. And the original version, which is in the Louvre, I think, was part of the conspiracy theory in Dan Brown's The Da Vinci Code. Right? If you look at how the angel is pointing and Virgin Mary's stretched hand, and there's a lot of drama about this, and this relates to Leonardo's popularity, Leonardo's presence in pop culture, something we will mention again. So this art as drama is a fixed quality in his work. There are a number, we can see also in the notebooks, again, his attempt to understand, to choreograph gestures of characters in different paintings to reflect this theatrical sensibility, turning seemingly static scenes into a narrative. This can also be seen in the unfinished Battle of Anghiari, right? And this drama is also personally reflected in the idea about the person behind all these paintings, the person behind the works. There is a lot of emotional complexity, and I joked in the beginning that the Mona Lisa is good, but it's not that good. Part of the discussion about the Mona Lisa is about its emotional complexity, the ambiguity in the look. I know that many art critics will come after the fact and try to explain something that has already become popular. And we always run across this in our discussions here. Well, why is it popular? Because it's popular. It's not that crazy enigmatic look that nobody understands. Well, maybe it is, but that doesn't explain the fame, right? A similar thing is reflected in the Last Supper. This emotional complexity, the different characters, their motivations. And maybe this can be understood as the reason for some of the popularity, but definitely doesn't explain it fully, and we'll talk about that, as I said. Salvator Mundi, the painting I mentioned before, which was sold for this huge sum of money, also reflects this sense of secrecy, this mystery that Dan Brown so elegantly capitalized on from the other paintings. Another painting reflecting this is Saint Jerome and some other practices. They reflect a number of issues. Well, I said Leonardo was a procrastinator and he didn't finish many paintings. Well, why didn't he do it? Was it the fear of failure? Was it the relentless curiosity? Is it that sometimes we don't want to drown into the details? And I don't know if this happens to you. I'm definitely guilty of that. But we saw too many projects. We don't continue all of them for a variety of reasons. Sometimes they just become less exciting or less interesting with time. This takes us to the next section, which is about actual creativeness, the great work, getting things done. Paintings are just a very small part of Leonardo's body of work, and here it is interesting to examine this document, and I would recommend you read it. It's his letter to Sforza, who was the ruler of Milan, and Leonardo wrote a letter to him basically describing his skills and sort of like sending a CV, implicitly asking to be employed by Milan's court. And in this letter, Leonardo shows his skills as an engineer of sorts, a military engineer, a civil engineer, and so on and so on. And at the end, he mentions that he can paint too. Right? And this is very interesting, reflecting Leonardo's get it done attitude. Right? He was an engineer. He was great in engineering and tinkering. And this is a natural extension to the things we've mentioned so far. Visionary engineering, speculative design. I mean, he designed things like a parachute, an air screw that will fly, an ornithopter, a diving suit, a tank, and a machine gun, of all things. So he wasn't short on ingenuity and speculative design. And he was able to get it done. Even though, interestingly, it seems that he hated war, but he believed that this designing all these military equipment and being a military engineer who hates war is quite interesting. He believed that it is a necessity so that he can have the money and the resources to keep doing what he loved, which was the art and the science. A very interesting aspect here related to his unfinished works that we just mentioned. Well, his relentless experimentation could explain some of the unfinished works. Many of these works were taken as a commission so that he could have time and the resources to experiment with a new style or a new theme or a new material on somebody else's money, right? Many different techniques, media, materials, and styles. And he was always trying these new ways. He would be interested in anatomy and so work on a project like Saint Jerome, which is still uncompleted, but then he would get something more interesting and move on. The question here, was he spread too thin? I mean, if he focused on one field, could we possibly have seen something magnificent, something of a grander scale? I don't know. But Leonardo, in addition to this, and this maybe has something to do with his personality, he was, as opposed to some of his peers, artists, he was extroverted in a sense. He was low on neuroticism, probably. And so he could blend with people nicely, and he could utilize the court's networks and have different collaborations. And I'll talk about that in the final section here. So he also had this personal flair, this strong personal charisma that helped him to get things done, that helped him to get along with different people. He was a man of the court most of his life. He even, during stages of his career, he designed elaborate pageants for patrons like Sforza, combining engineering, music, and costume design. And these reveal his love for blending art and science and the drama and creating wonder. Leonardo was a master in using systems and networks, and the chance came by itself later. But his father was a notary, and his father's job probably was the thing that got him the apprenticeship in Verrocchio's workshop, which was one of the most well-known workshops in Florence at the time, and this put him in touch directly or indirectly with the Medicis. Florence and the Medicis were the epicenter of art and knowledge at that time, and this could be the reason he was employed by Sforza in Milan. And the thing I want to stress here is the power of these networks, the power of using your connections, the people you know, and the stickiness of networks, right? If you are with the right people, you will tend to be with the right people for longer periods of time, provided that it's not too risky. When a certain city in which he was working, like Milan, was at war, and then when it was sacked, he had to leave, okay? Leonardo was always thinking in terms of systems, so in personal life, but also in design, in engineering, but also holistically, even more holistically, right? So he was always thinking about the connections between things, this holistic perspective we talked about, and this also reflects in a number of works. His work on urban design, his work on pulleys, the robotic knight, which was made later, it wasn't made during his lifetime. So this systems thinking is a very interesting metaphor for his understanding of how to get things done, but also of how things worked out. We have to add the factor of chance here, because during his lifetime and even centuries after, Leonardo wasn't the famous Leonardo that we all know. So we'll reflect on that next. So we've seen how Leonardo's understanding, Leonardo's pursuit of knowledge, knowledge management, approach to science, artistic vision, creativeness, getting things done, how all of these things come together to build this beautiful, rich image of great work that is the work of Leonardo da Vinci. And I hope that this exploration has uncovered some of the aspects that I called something is missing in the beginning when I talked about the Mona Lisa. And now I want to reflect on this final component of this something is missing hypothesis. So basically, it is Leonardo the icon, okay? We have to first acknowledge that for most of history, even during his lifetime, Leonardo was considered a master somehow. Then he was almost forgotten. And for most of history, other peers like Raphael, like Michelangelo, were considered the best, not Leonardo da Vinci. But something happened 100 or so, 100 to 100 years ago that changed this. Napoleon's invasions uncovered some of the notebooks, made them famous. The age of Romanticism sort of rediscovered Leonardo and depicted him as a tortured genius. And this raised interest in Leonardo, the mystery of his works, the emotional complexity around some of them. as we've talked. But things started becoming more dramatic, started growing exponentially when the Mona Lisa was stolen from the Louvre 100 years ago. And it was in the news, and the press was covering this incident of stealing the Mona Lisa. And then people started being interested. Well, what is this painting? Why was it stolen? And it was retrieved and it was returned to the Louvre. And then people wanted to see this painting that was stolen, and this kind of increased its popularity and Leonardo's popularity in turn. Leonardo is also very strongly present in popular culture. I mentioned Dan Brown's book and other books like How to Think Like Leonardo da Vinci, and these books have a great role in making an artist more popular. So the component here, I guess, which is related to the chance element we mentioned in the last section, is something we've said over and over, right? It's something we've discussed with Picasso. It could have been somebody else. I mean, I personally don't believe in this strong determinism in art. So why are we talking about Leonardo da Vinci? Well, because everyone is talking about Leonardo da Vinci, and we have a lot to talk about. The second aspect is about the polymath. And we've seen that Leonardo was a polymath, interested in all these different fields, right? From painting, sculpture, to urban design, mechanical engineering, and so on. And we can see from the notebooks that he was driven by this, and I called it demonic, crazy curiosity, right? It is taking him left and right, and it is moving him from one project to another, abandoning commissions, always being dragged behind this new, very interesting concept or theme that he is trying to explore. And here we can reflect on the perils and the blessings of free curiosity, right? We have this tension, all of us, we have this tension. And I mentioned that, reflect on your own experiences. Do you leave projects unfinished? Why? Okay, so we have this tension between our free destiny or our need for practical creativeness and unique contribution. Our freedom tells us to move around, to explore, but the need for practical creativeness and unique contribution tells us to focus on one thing. And this is sort of a very important, interesting duality that I'm trying to explore. And here the question would be, would you rather be an expert or a polymath? The second question is the polymath lost forever?